The Hoopheads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hey Hoopheads, wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. We've had their partnership manager and training specialist Jefferson Mason and marketing manager Nick Bartlett on the show in the past, and we couldn't be more excited about what they're doing for the game of basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market and truly accelerate skill development faster than ever. Beyond efficient reps, Dr. Dish provides training expertise and versatility designed to develop complete players. The new Dr. Dish CT machine has further revolutionized basketball training with over 150 plus on-demand individual and team workouts from some of the best coaches and trainers in the game. These workouts include video instruction and combine game-like shooting drills with ball handling, conditioning, and agility drills. Along with workouts, the Dr. Dish training management system also provides stat tracking and analytics to track progress and ensure accountability. These are just a few reasons why top programs like Duke, North Carolina, Louisville, Florida, Baylor, and countless others are upgrading to Dr. Dish. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com. Follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And make sure you mention the Hoopheads Podcast to get $300 off your next Dr. Dish purchase. That's a great deal, Hoopheads. Get out and get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
My goal is to educate young men and women to focus on finding the best fit from an academic, athletic, financial, and a social standpoint, and to not focus on the level of the school.
Chad Hixon is currently the head coach of the Atlanta Lightning 17U program, a travel basketball team based out of Conyers, Georgia. Chad's two biggest passions are education and basketball. Through his platform, he works to expose young people to all of the opportunities available to them, both on and off the basketball court. Hixon is a 2010 graduate of Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. At Emory, he was a 4-year member of the men's basketball program, 2 at the Oxford College campus, and 2 at the Atlanta campus. During the 06-07 and 07-08 seasons, he was named a second-team All-American. After graduation, Chad took a few years off from basketball before returning to Emory as a volunteer assistant under Head Coach Jason Zimmerman from 2013 to 2016. In those 3 years, Emory went to 3 NCAA Division III Tournaments, including 1 Elite Eight and 2 Sweet 16s. Following the 2016 season, Hixon transitioned to high school basketball coaching, serving as an assistant coach at Lakeside High School from 2016 to 2018 and Grady High School during the 2018-2019 season. Make sure you subscribe to the Hoopheads Podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a 5-star rating and review. Believe it or not, those ratings help your friends and colleagues find the show. If you leave a review, we'll give you a shout-out on the show in the coming weeks. Please visit our website, hoopheadspod.com, to listen to episodes from our archive, subscribe to our weekly newsletter, or get yourself an official Hoopheads Pod t-shirt. This episode is packed with solid advice for coaches, parents, and players, so make sure you're prepared to take some notes as you listen to our conversation with Coach Chad Hixon from the Atlanta Lightning in the state of Georgia. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads Podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel, and tonight we are pleased to welcome to the podcast basketball coach Chad Hixon. Chad, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you on, get a chance to dig into your basketball journey, learn a little bit more about you as a basketball player, basketball coach, and all the things that you were trying to do to help young people improve themselves through the game of basketball. I want to start out by going back in time to when you were a kid, and let's talk a little bit about how you got into the game of basketball when you were younger.
Sure. Thinking back, I think I was around age 4 or 5. Just can remember watching Michael Jordan, watching the Bulls, and it really kind of sparked that love for me. Started playing around that age in like local rec leagues and church leagues. as I got older, started playing school ball in middle school and whatnot, then which eventually led to high school and so forth. So been around basketball now for 25 plus years. I love it. Can't imagine my life without it.
All right, can't let the Jordan comment go by without
absolutely
putting out the argument of greatest of all time, Michael Jordan, or do you have somebody else, or what's your thoughts on that whole discussion?
Well, man, as somebody who grew up in the 90s, he's always going to be my GOAT. He's always number one for me. I can't imagine ever putting anybody above him.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I grew up. By the time the 90s rolled around, I was born in 1970, so the beginning of his career sort of coincided with my childhood when he was at Carolina, and then going up and kind of watching his entire career unfold kind of before my eyes. And I always tell people that what makes me feel that he's the greatest player of all time, and we could go on and on and on about stats and this and that, is, to me, it was always just a feel that when you watched Jordan play and the game came down to the last 3 or 4 minutes, I always had 100% confidence that he was going to figure out a way to win that game for his team. And I've never felt that way 100% about any other athlete besides him, not just in basketball, but in any sport. And to me, that's the ultimate argument. The ultimate thing is that you're a winner. You're going to win games. You're going to figure it out. And I just think, to me, the argument that other guys are better than him always falls on deaf ears when people try to bring that to me, because I still just think, man, there's nobody. I never watched anybody who instilled as much belief in me as he did when I watched him play. I just always felt like he was going to come through. And that's not to say that obviously he always did, because there were occasions where he didn't. But more times than not, man, he was just – I still remember where I was when he hit the shot over Byron Russell.
Oh, I'll never forget it.
Standing in my living room. I was by myself actually watching that game, and I stood up off my couch, and I put my hands on the top of my head, and I walked around in circles for like 25 seconds, just not in so much in disbelief, but just in like, I can't believe that this guy just lives out exactly what you would have envisioned happened, and it's just so hard to wrap your head around how somebody can just be that good.
Yeah, it was like a movie. That's how you would like write up a movie, and if you did that, people wouldn't believe it because it just seemed a little bit too cheesy. But not only that shot, but like the steal or the layup, layup, and then the steal from Malone, and then to hit that shot, it's just unbelievable. And the weird thing is, like, I missed his prime. My most vivid memories are like the 96, 97, 98.
Right.
We won't talk about the Wizard years, but
yeah.
He was really past his prime at that point. So I didn't see him at his best, but I mean, I can't ever put anybody above him.
His athletic best is just unbelievable. I think there's never been anybody as ruthlessly competitive as him, and just wanting to win at all costs. And obviously the documentary is going to be coming out hopefully sooner rather than later. I mean, I think everybody in the basketball world, especially considering that we're all sitting at home sheltering in place, that when that documentary comes out, there's just so many people just chomping at the bit to get their eyes on that and see what it's going to be all about. I personally can't wait. I'm so excited. I will be glued to the TV whenever that thing eventually comes on, because I just think it's going to be so compelling to see some of those behind the scenes stuff that you've read about, you've heard about. There's been things, but to put it all into one package and see it along with the visual is just going to be unbelievable.
I agree. Can't wait.
I'm excited about, I'm hoping they could dig into the North Carolina part of his career. I know there's some stuff in the trailer just about when he went from being Mike Jordan to being Michael Jordan when he hit the shot as a freshman. And so I hope there's some unseen behind the scenes footage there that hasn't really been out, and some things that are talked about there, because I think it's always interesting to kind of hear about the genesis of anyone, let alone the genesis of kind of the greatest player of all time. So I'm super excited about that and can't wait for that to come to pass. So let's go back to you and talk a little bit about how you went about as you were a kid. How did you go about improving your game and getting better? What were some of the things that you did during the time when you were, like, let's say, a high school player? How did you go about improving it and getting better?
Great question. So I was fortunate enough. One of my very best friends growing up had an older brother named Brendan Plavick, who he played at Vanderbilt and then played at UNC Charlotte. So I was able to, like, growing up, like, see some of the things that he did, all the extra work he put in. So I just kind of tried to adopt some of those things coming up, whether it was working on ball handling, working on shooting, doing form shooting, getting up game shots and those sorts of things. Flexibility was a huge thing that he always worked on that I didn't see a lot of other people doing. So I tried to do that as well, kind of as I was growing up. So having him there, at least when I was in like elementary school age, as that example, was very helpful. And then obviously once I got into high school, I work out with the team, work out with my teammates and things like that.
What did flexibility look like? I'm just curious. Well, like, what were some of the things that he did that you adopted?
Well, he was probably the first male basketball player I ever saw that could do a split. I never quite got that flexible, but just seeing him, not only stretch before physical activity, but just as a part of working to be a better player, just sitting at home, he would be doing stretches, just trying to improve his flexibility. And as a little kid, it just wasn't something that I had ever thought of as something that you could do to improve as a basketball player. So just like little things like that, just working on those things, just trying to make yourself stand out from the crowd by doing those little things.
Yeah, I think it's amazing when you think about the advantages that kids have today in terms of access to knowledge about what's good for them, both from a basketball skill development standpoint and also from a nutrition, training, conditioning, sleep, recovery, all those things. That
it's so different now.
It's just amazing. I think back to, again, like when I played, and we used to have, when I was playing at Kent State, we would practice in the preseason. We would have these practices. We practice all week, and then Saturday morning we'd get up at 7 a.m. and we'd have probably a 1 hour practice maybe, and then we'd do like a 2 hour inter squad scrimmage. And then when that scrimmage was over at about 10:30, we wouldn't have practice again until the following Monday because we always had Sunday off. And literally we would go from that practice, people would shower, get dressed, and then we'd go to Ponderosa and we'd hit the buffet and just eat. I mean, we'd seriously sit there. That place, I'm surprised it didn't go bankrupt just because of us. And we would sit there for 2-3 hours just drinking gallons of soda and eating chicken wings and macaroni and cheese and having a steak and all this stuff. And you think back now and you're like, God, that was so bad for us. And part of me wonders if I would have had access to some of the training and the knowledge that kids and players and teams and coaches have today, just how different I might have been as an athlete. I think it's just interesting to think about because there's so much more access for kids to be able to understand what the right things are that they should be doing. Not to say that everybody's always doing them, but certainly you have access to it if you want it.
Absolutely. Like you said, there's just so much more information out now. We know more, we have more knowledge, and then, like I said, kids have access to that information. But like I said, everyone's not doing it. The ones who do it are the ones who obviously get better and stand out. It's one of those things, if it was easy, everyone would do it.
No question. So as you were going through your high school career, at what point did you start to think that A, you wanted to maybe try to play basketball in college, and then B, when did you think that opportunity was going to be realistic? Just talk a little bit about your process for going through your career as a high school player and then thinking about the college experience that you wanted to have.
So playing college ball was always the goal, from, I'd say, elementary school age. When did I actually think it was going to happen? That is a long story. So I had a pretty decent high school career. My senior year, I think I averaged like 16, 4, and 4. We went to the state tournament, lost in the first round. Didn't really have any opportunities to play directly out of high school. I talked to a couple of Division III schools, but like even kids nowadays, I kind of shrugged them off, thinking that I was too good for it or that was beneath me and so forth. So what I actually did is I actually went to the University of West Georgia just as a regular student my freshman year of college. I just played intramurals. But while I was there, I still wanted to play. So I just started doing some research and looking around. Trying to find some opportunities for me. I wanted a kind of a more challenging environment academically. So I did come across Oxford College at Emory University, which is a 2-year college within Emory University. Reached out to their coaches, started that whole process. Applied for admissions. They told me I had to, get certain grades in particular classes. So I studied my butt off and tried to get all A's. And luckily I was able to get in. And that's how I ended up playing college basketball. Looking back on it, with the knowledge I have now, I wish I had done some things differently. Number one, I wish I had worked a whole lot harder in high school academically. I graduated with a 3.2. I easily could have had a 3.6, 3.7 GPA, and that combined with my SAT scores just would have opened up a whole lot more opportunities for me. But I was just so singularly focused on basketball scholarship. And when that didn't materialize, I had to figure out what else I was going to do. And luckily I was able to go to West Georgia for a year, and then everything eventually worked out for me.
So do you think when you look back on that time and you had some of those Division IIIs that talked to you, and as you said, you kind of were like, I don't know, I think I'm better than that. When you look back on that, do you think that that initial contact you had with those coaches and maybe your lack of enthusiasm, let's say, immediately turned those coaches, those programs off, where maybe if you had shown a little bit more interest that you might have had one of those opportunities, even with your situation where you could have worked harder, you could have had a higher GPA. Do you think if you had approached it differently from that standpoint, showing more interest, that you might have been able to get a chance to go to one of those other schools that maybe had some interest in you when you were in high school?
Absolutely. And I wasn't, dismissive or anything like that. I just, I didn't know any better.
Right.
And I didn't have anyone, to kind of tell me the truth, which is what I kind of try to do with kids now. I didn't have anybody in my ear or telling me that at the time. So, I was ignorant, just to be quite honest. I didn't know any better. Looking back now, 15 years later, I definitely wish I had done things differently. But I think the main thing is if I had had a higher GPA, that would have made those opportunities more affordable and more realistic for me. But again, hindsight's always 20/20. So we live and we learn.
For sure. Do you think if you were the exact same person, exact same player, exact same GPA that you were then today, do you think it would be easier for you to get access to the kind of information that you might have needed to say, hey, you need to step it up so that you can do the things maybe that you want to do? Because I know for myself, I look back at my recruitment and I had no knowledge of basically anything. My high school coach had never had anybody recruited. Obviously, my parents, I was the oldest child in our family. They had never gone through that experience. I was a player, never had gone through that experience. The whole summer basketball circuit didn't exist. Basically, my dad was my coach and I was the GM of our summer team, and just recruiting guys is not at all like it was today where, you might have a mentor or somebody that works with you outside of your high school program. So just like you, I was ignorant about what the process was. And I think that almost ended up costing me opportunities that I ended up taking, but I almost blew that opportunity by declining an official visit because I thought, I don't want to go and visit Kent State. That's below me. I'm waiting for Duke and North Carolina and Ohio State to come calling. And just like you, I had no idea that they weren't going to be calling. And so now I think kids have better access to information, kind of like the same way we talked about in terms of skill development and training. Kids who are willing to use those mentors, that information, look and find that, I think can go in a better direction, but you still have to be able to go out and find it. So do you think that if you had all that information, things might have turned out differently for you?
I do. And just nowadays, there's so much more, so many more resources available, whether it's, these different recruiting services that are out there that can assist kids. Social media has been a huge change. I was in high school, I think the only thing we had was like MySpace.
Yep.
And it's so different now. And then, I would play a game and, it might be 2 or 3 weeks before I could get the film. And, we were still using VHS. Nowadays, a kid plays a game, 30 minutes after the game, he's got a highlight tape. So it's just so different now. I do think things would have been different if I had access to the things that are available now. But I also say this, I think there's so many more good players now. I may not have been able to play at the same level now just because there's just so much more talent out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of kids now. I think that the skill development, portion of basketball is so much better. And I think that if you look at, we've had this conversation with a bunch of coaches, but I think if you look at the back end of like a high school roster, especially, those kids are way more skilled than kids might have been, certainly when I was playing and probably when you were playing as well. And I think that's a trend in basketball that I don't think there's any argument about. I think you can argue that some of those kids maybe don't have as high of a basketball IQ as some of the kids in the past in certain cases, because they're just, like, I think playing on the playground and playing with kids at different ages and some of those things and the amount of pickup ball that people from my era played, I think that made a difference in terms of basketball IQ. But in terms of being better athletes and in terms of being better skilled, I don't think there's any question that the skill level and the athleticism of players today is far superior to what it was certainly when I played, and probably, as you said, the time when you played as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I see kids doing things now that like I didn't even like comprehend. Like we
didn't even know they existed,
we didn't even
right?
think to do that when I played. And
For
again,
sure,
it's just 15 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
I definitely agree that the skill wise it's so different, and I do think, as you were saying, there's less of an emphasis on playing now. It's just everybody, I have my trainer. I'm going to go work out and do individual stuff. There's a lot less 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 5-on-5 that's going on now, particularly on the playgrounds and things like that, as you said.
Yeah, you just don't see playground outdoor basketball hardly at all being played anywhere. And I know it's not being played around here in Cleveland very much. And as we talk to people around the country, we hear basically that same story that, there was a park or a playground that I used to play at, or I used to drive by all the time. There'd always be players there. And now I drive by it and there's nobody there. And I think, as you said, kids are with a trainer, or they're playing with their AAU team, or they're in an air-conditioned gym somewhere, and they're not out on the playground playing with kids of different ages and playing with adults and playing as much 2-on-2 and 3-on-3 and 1-on-1, which I think about the amount of time that I spent doing those things. And it certainly added up to far more time than what I did playing organized basketball, whereas today I think that equation is reversed. And as I always say, there's good and bad to both of those systems. I think you can make an argument that kids today are probably exposed to a lot better coaching, whether that's in-person coaching from the time they're younger, or whether that's, again, just having access to what they have on the internet. And yet I still feel like they miss out on some of those tricks of the trade that you pick up as a pickup basketball player that you just don't get when you're always playing in front of a crowd where your mom or your dad are in the stands or somebody's watching you. I think you tend to kind of fall back on your strengths as opposed to maybe stretching yourself and trying to add different things to your game. So there's good and bad to the whole thing, but I'm sure we'll continue to talk about this as we get into what you're doing now with the Atlanta Lightning a little bit later on. Let's talk to you about the biggest adjustment when you finally did step onto a college floor. What was your biggest adjustment from a basketball perspective, if you can remember back to that time?
Guys are just bigger, stronger, and faster, and the game moves so much quicker than the high school game. That'd probably be the biggest thing. You got to get your shot off quicker. You got to fight through screens. You got to box out every possession. You got to run hard every possession. If you don't, you're going to get beat. My coach always used to say, casual gets you beat. You can't be the cool guy. You got to be locked in, focused the entire time. Just a lot of the details of the game that get emphasized much more at the collegiate level than they do in high school. One, because you got more time to go into greater detail. And secondly, just because you got to do those little things if you're going to win.
What did the level of play, how did it compare at the Oxford branch versus when you eventually got to the main campus at Emory with Coach Zimmerman? Talk about the difference in if there was a difference in the level of play there and just how that transition ended up going for you.
Gotcha. Yeah. So when I was at Oxford, because it's a 2-year school, we would typically play junior colleges or 4-year JV programs. So when we were playing junior college programs in the state of Georgia, we're playing folks that have mid and high major Division I prospects on their team. So athletically, size wise, I'd say it was more challenging or daunting at the Oxford campus. When we get to the Emory, the Atlanta campus, the coaching, I would say, probably a little bit better, got higher basketball IQ. Guys weren't quite as athletic, but they definitely knew how to play. That'd probably be the biggest difference, I'd say. both challenging in their own separate ways.
Which one would you say, if you had to make the argument, which style of play fit you better as a player?
We had less talent at Oxford, so there was a lot of ISO ball. We were still in that ISO ball era back then. So for me, that was kind of the more quote unquote exciting way to play. Emory, we did a lot of 5-out motion, much more ball movement, player movement, played at a much faster pace as well. That is kind of how I've grown to love watching basketball. A lot of it comes from my time playing under Coach Z, and then subsequently coaching under him. In my opinion, I think that's the way basketball should be played. That's the way I like to see the game played, and all the teams that I coach, I try to implement that same style.
All right. What was your favorite memory from playing at Emory? What was if one or two things that stand out to you when you look back on your playing career as a collegiate player? What stands out to you as one of your fondest memories?
So it was such a life-changing experience for me. Like my first time going to Chicago, my first time going to New York, Boston, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, all those things were because of playing basketball at Emory University. So I'd probably say my first time going to New York, we stayed right downtown, right across from the Empire State Building. Like, that's something you see on TV all the time, but to just be right there around the corner from it would probably be my best non-basketball memory. Basketball.
What was your first impression of New York? Because I went to New York for the first and actually only time when I was playing in college. We played in the tournament. So I'm curious to hear what your first impression was, and then I'll share mine.
It was like, what is going on? I've been in Georgia my entire life. We move at a slower pace down here. New York is the complete opposite of that. I've never seen so many taxi cabs in my life. Never seen so many people congregated together in one place at the same time. It's just night and day from what I was used to growing up.
Yeah, I was amazed by the sheer number of people. And the thing that I always come back to is it felt like almost like the traffic lights and the walk and don't walk signs were irrelevant. It was just people walking through the crosswalk. And then when there was a break in there, a car would kind of nudge its way through the pedestrians. Then it would be cars until there was a tiny little break in the cars. Then the people would start going again. I just remember it being so crowded with so many people. And as you said, just the energy and just the pace of people moving was just incredible to me. And like I said, I haven't gotten a chance to go back. Definitely on my list of places that I want to get back to, but I can totally understand where that would be a memory that stood out for you, because it certainly was one that stood out for me as well. So give us your basketball memory.
Basketball memory would probably be my senior year. My senior year at Emory was actually Coach Zimmerman's first winning season there. We finished 15-10. I think we went 7-7 in the UAA. They haven't. I don't think he's won less than 18 or 19 games since then. So the program's really taken off since then. It feels good to be to say that I was on that first winning team, because the program had kind of been down for about 20 years prior to him getting there, and he's got the thing really rolling now. But as somebody who was there kind of when it got started, to see where it is now, it's just really amazing to see.
Yeah, I agree. That's very cool. I had a similar experience when I was at Kent. We had 2 seasons where we won 20 games and went to the NIT, and we were 1 point away from making the NCAA tournament my freshman year. And so the program was solid, but certainly wasn't a great program. And then I graduated in '92, and then in 2002, Kent went to the Elite Eight and was 1 game away from making it to the Final Four. And that whole experience for me, watching it as a fan, as an alum of the program, was kind of surreal, because it was really hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that this program that I had played in, that now they were 1 game away from the Final Four. And there's a sense of pride that as that program builds up and you've been a part of it and you've contributed in some small way to their success, I can totally understand where you're coming from on that, because you feel that connection, even though you haven't been there for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, whatever it may be. You always still feel connected to that family back at your university when you played. I think there's always a bond with obviously the guys you played with, but I think there's also a bond with the kids who are currently a part of the program and the coaching staff, even if you've been gone for a while. And in your case, obviously Coach Zimmerman is still there as well.
Yeah, it definitely makes it easier if your coach is still there.
No question.
He and I talk fairly frequently. I try to check in on him. I go to as many games as I can, so definitely still feel very connected to the school and to the program.
Head Start Basketball, along with members of the J. Billis Skills Camp staff, will be hosting the very first Prime Skills Camp, an affiliate of the J. Billis Skills Camp that is held annually in Charlotte, North Carolina. Prime Skills Camp will take place on the campus of Western Reserve Academy, just outside of Cleveland, Ohio, June 26th through the 28th, and will be designed for boys rising to grades 6 through 9. Prime Skills Camp will mirror the J. Billis Skills Camp in daily programming, teaching, coach-to-camper ratio, and quality of instruction. Prime Skills Camp brings all of the team-oriented individual instruction, focus on the fundamentals, and high-level coaching to young men aspiring to a high school varsity basketball experience. This camp is operated by Billis Camp veterans and includes the J. Billis Coaches Development Program alongside the camp, ensuring that the quality of teaching and coaching at this camp is second to none. Please visit headstartbasketball.com or jbilliscamp.com for more information or to get registered. While you were playing, when was there a thought that coaching was going to be in your future? Was that something that you kind of always knew in the back of your head as you were growing up, or was it something that came suddenly when you got done playing? You looked around, you said, I want to still be involved in the game. How can I do that? Just which one of those paths better describes you?
Kind of actually neither, to be honest. When I graduated, I was like, forget this. I'm done with basketball. So I took off for about 3 years or so. I still watched it and obviously still played a little bit as well. Came to Emory games and things like that. Then right around like that third, fourth year, I started getting the itch. Like, I need this to be a bigger part of my life. It'd been pretty much my life for, about 20 years. And I just wanted to really get back into it. I reached out to Coach Z to ask about coming on staff as a volunteer assistant. He said yes. I'm very thankful for that. So I came on staff. That gave me an opportunity to get back involved in the game, be involved at Emory, obviously where I went to school. And it's just kind of gone up from there. I was there for 3 years, and then I started doing AAU as well as high school. So that bug, like I said, it started about 3 or 4 years after I graduated from Emory, and it's just only gotten bigger and stronger since then.
So when you went back and you go back to your college program with your coach, and obviously your memories, your interactions with Coach Zimmerman up until that point is as a coach-player relationship. And now suddenly you go from being a player the last time you interacted with him to now you're a coach on his staff. Talk about what that was like in terms of the relationship between the two of you and how you kind of navigated that, going from he's my coach to now he's my coworker, still my boss, but we're on we're on the same side of this equation. Just talk about what that transition was like.
So he and I kind of have a special relationship from this standpoint. He got the job at Emory, I think, in April 2007. I was still at Oxford at the time. I believe that very first week he got the job at the Atlanta campus. He came down to Oxford to watch us work out. So I've known him for, we're getting close to 15 years now. So we've always had that relationship. Obviously, as a player and coach, we bumped heads at times. So it was mostly my fault looking back. Did some dumb things as a college student, looking back on it. But I'm thankful for the experience and the opportunity he gave me as a player. I'm thankful that I was able to get an Emory education. I'll never be able to repay him for that. As far as, transition to being a coach, it's pretty much the same. He's always going to be Coach Zimmerman to me. He's always coach. I don't know. I could never just, call him Jason or anything like that. He's always just going to be coach. So it was a really, really educational experience. Listening to him talk to the current players and kind of thinking back on a time when I played, a lot of those things that he said to me back then didn't make sense. And now here I am, 4 or 5 years older, it starts to click and it makes sense. Okay, now I understand why he said that. Now that makes sense. Looking at the things from like kind of an outsider's perspective as opposed to being, kind of in the fire, things made a whole lot more sense. So I was able to share some of those experiences that I had with the players on the team. Maybe someone, he and Coach Zimmerman maybe bumping heads. I can kind of talk to him about some of my experiences as a player to kind of help him navigate that situation and work through it. Just things like that. I was able to, talk about my own personal experiences and share those things with players. I think it was helpful. I hope it was. But we were very successful. My first year there, we went to the Elite Eight. The next 2 years, we went to the Sweet 16. So basketball-wise on the court, it was a great experience. I got to go to some NCAA tournament games. I definitely didn't get to do that as a player because we weren't good enough. So I'm grateful for that experience. It was life-changing, just to be honest.
What were some things? So you mentioned that there were things that you were able to share with the current players while you were coaching that maybe helped to relate better what Coach Zimmerman was trying to say. Can you think of an example or two of something that, or a piece of advice that maybe he gave, or some type of coaching that he gave you that when you were playing, you're like, I don't really get what he's saying. But then once you're on the other side, can you give us an example of something that would kind of fit that?
Oh, absolutely. I got multiple examples.
All right, cool.
The main thing, I would say is, and we hear this in other areas of life as well, is sometimes you have to listen to what someone's saying versus how they're saying it. So, coach may be getting on you, yelling at you about something. That's just because he's a passionate dude. That's just who he is. Don't focus on that. Focus on what he's telling you. He's telling you you need to run harder. You need to get to your spot on time. You need to be ready to shoot when you catch it. Things like that. That as a 18, 19, 20-year-old, you may not be able to grasp. But, as a 25-year-old, stuff like that makes more sense. From a basketball perspective, the biggest thing is the importance of going game speed at all times. If you're in, I hear a lot of kids talking about, I was in the gym for 3 hours, 3.5 hours, working out. Well, you weren't going hard for those 3 hours because it's not possible for you to work out and go as hard as you possibly can for 3 hours. You can get all that done in 45 minutes if you're going hard and going game speed. So that'd be the biggest thing.
I got a great story for that, Chad. I got a great story. I have not told this story on the podcast, but I used to go and work out at this health club, and I would go and I had my shooting workout that I would do. And kind of, it's funny, I've said this part of it on the podcast before, where I would do the exact same shooting workout. If I was by myself, I did the exact same drills every single day, probably from the time I was 16 until I was graduated from college. Exact same workout. But that workout had game speed shots, and it would probably take me about an hour and 15 minutes or so. And there was another guy who was my age who went to a different high school in the area, and he would always be up at the same health club. And I'd come in and I'd be doing my workout, and I'd talk to him either before or after my workout, just, saying hello. And he would always tell me, man, I've been here for 3 hours. I'm working so hard. And I'd see him, he'd be I'd be in the gym for like an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 20 minutes, just sweating, doing all my stuff. And I'd see him and he'd walk over and he'd be talking to somebody over by the exercise bicycles. And then he'd sit down on the floor and, do some butterfly stretches. And then he'd get up and take some free throws. And then, it just, and I always used to laugh because I would say, he's like, I've been here this long. And I'm like, well, I've been here an hour and 20 minutes. I've done like 10 times as much as you have in this time that you have, that you've been. And I think a lot of times, as you said, kids don't always understand what it takes. And it takes somebody, whether it's a coach or a peer or somebody, to kind of get that message across to them. Like, look, it's not the amount of time you spend, it's the amount of effort that you're putting into that time that really makes a difference. So I think that's a key point for sure, that if you were able to get that across to the players, I'm sure that that's something that they appreciated. Again, maybe not in the moment, and I'm sure Coach Zimmerman appreciated it too.
Yeah, like I said, just things you don't understand as a 19-year-old, that make more sense as you get older. Another thing he used to always say, I think he still says it, is when you help somebody, you help yourself. I think that applies to basketball as well as life. From a basketball standpoint, if you set a good screen, that's more likely going to get you open. If you run hard to your spot, the defense has to react. That may get you an open shot, or it's going to get your teammate an open shot. Things like that. That, again, didn't make sense when I was playing, but now that I'm older and I watch the game, I see it from a different perspective. I can see how all five players are working together, and if one person doesn't do their job, then it just throws everything off. But if all five guys are locked in and doing what they're supposed to do, it just makes it that more difficult to guard.
Don't you wish you could insert your current brain into your 19-year-old self?
Oh man, oh man, I do. Well, I'd go back to high school and study harder.
Yeah,
that's what I would do.
Yeah, understood. All right, so let me ask you this: since you went from going from a player to a coach, what was something about coaching, and maybe it could be specific to Emory or maybe not, but just something that surprised you about coaching that before you got into it you didn't realize, but once you were a part of the coaching staff that you're like, man, I didn't realize coaches did so much of this, or I didn't realize they had to do that, or I didn't realize that this was such a hard part of the job. Can you think of anything that fits that particular criteria?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As a player, you just really almost in a vacuum or insulated. You don't understand all the other moving parts within the program. So as a player, I'm told, we have practice at 2:00. Get to the gym, 1:15, get changed and all that, be on the court about 1:30 or so we can get warmed up. Well, if we have practice at 2, coach has been there probably since like 10, going over the practice plan, walking through everything, assigning different duties to each of the assistants on staff. Things like that. You just, as a player, you just show up to practice, but you don't think about all the planning that has gone into each practice, game prep, all those kinds of things. Laundry, for instance, another thing you don't think about as a player. You just come and your jersey's hanging up. You don't think about an individual or a person had to wash that and fold it and hang it up for you. Things like that. You go on the road. You just know you go to the restaurant and sit down and eat. You don't think about all the planning that had to go into the logistics and things like that. Hotel, same thing. Coach just says, come up to the room. We got some snacks and things like that for you. Well, you don't think about the fact that, one of your coaches had to go to, Sam's Club or somewhere like that and buy all that stuff and carry it back to the hotel. Just all those like moving parts within a basketball program that exist outside of, actually being on the basketball court.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think players so often only see what the coaches do on the basketball floor, whether that's the practice floor, whether that's on game night, and they don't see all of the little things that go on behind the scenes. And I think you hit it very well, especially when you're talking about whether it's the junior college level or Division III level or NAIA level, where you don't have a huge number of assistant coaches, but all those assistant coaches and even the head coach has to wear lots and lots of different hats to be able to do all those things, whether it's administrative, logistical, transportation, all that stuff. I think you forget or you don't even realize as a player that that stuff still has to be done. And as you move up in levels, then there's just more coaches available to do all those things. Not that they don't have to get done, but there's just a bigger staff that can go ahead and get it done. I'm sure we've talked to a bunch of coaches who have started at, whether it's the junior college level or Division III level, that just talk about how even if they eventually moved up to other levels, how much they appreciated their experience at the lower levels of college basketball simply because they had to do everything. And in having to do everything, they learned what it takes to do those different jobs. And then when they got to a position where maybe their responsibilities were cut down, they only had to focus on certain areas, they were even better and stronger in those areas because they already had experience doing those things. And I think that's something that young coaches especially need to keep in mind as you're trying to break into the business. And I think your story is a great one in that, here you just volunteered as a member of the staff. And I think so many people, you hear those stories of young coaches who get started. And so often the story is, hey, I volunteered, or hey, I was a graduate assistant, and I was making $2,000 for the year, and I was living in some house in somebody's basement in a room. And people see a lot of the glamour of coaching, but they don't always think about the persistence and the effort that it takes, especially when you're trying to break into it for the first time. And I think your story is a good illustration of that.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually fortunate to where I was still working full time, and I was coaching after I got out of my 9 to 5. As you mentioned, like I know coaches who were doing that full time and making a very, very small amount of money, a wage that many of us would consider not livable. So yeah, it's definitely something that if you want to get into it, you got to love it, and you're gonna have to grind and pay your dues and whatnot. But I do think it's worth it in the end. You just gotta work your way through it and grind, and eventually everything will work out for you.
Absolutely. All right, so you leave Emory and you get an opportunity to coach as an assistant at a couple different high schools. Talk about the why behind that, and then just what your experiences were like at the high school level compared to the college level.
Sure. Love my time at Emory, but my passion is in education and in helping young people make that transition from high school to college. So I felt that I could best fulfill and kind of work in my passion by coaching at the high school level, doing that and helping high school kids, finding the best fit for them from a college basketball standpoint. So the transition was pretty smooth. Obviously, going from college to high school, the talent level drops a little bit. You don't have quite as much time to work with kids. But I loved my 2 years at Lakeside. Loved my 1 year at Grady. Took this year off, but I am looking to get back into it either next year or sometime in the future, because it's really what I'm passionate about. I love doing it. I love working with kids and helping them figure out where their next step is.
And then when does the AAU Atlanta Lightning piece of that come to pass? Is that something that you took up while you were still coaching at the high school level, or was that something that you picked up once you left the high school ranks this year?
So this will be if it ever gets started, this will be my 4th year with the Atlanta Lightning. I started with them my 2nd year at Lakeside, as I was transitioning from my first to 2nd year at Lakeside. I was able I came across one of the assistant coaches with the Atlanta Lightning via Twitter. And I went and watched them practice, and they allowed me to come on staff as an assistant with the 17U team that first year. And then the following year, I was a 17U head coach, and then I coached again as a 17U head coach last year. And then this upcoming year would have been my 3rd as the head coach.
Talk to me a little bit about what you would see, since you've been on both sides of this equation. You have the high school perspective and you have the AAU perspective. Tell me what your ideal scenario would be in terms of the relationship between the AAU program that a player plays for, the player themselves, and then their high school coaching staff. What would that ideal relationship look like in your mind?
Well, ideally, the two coaches would be working together for the benefit of the kid. Unfortunately, that does not happen in a lot of situations. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. Living where I live in Atlanta, Georgia, I would say that in a lot of instances, there are some high school coaches and AAU coaches that have strong relationships, and others that maybe don't have a strong relationship. That's unfortunate. It ultimately just ends up hurting the kid. It should be about helping him or her find what's best for them and their family. Unfortunately, our ego gets in the way at times, and that can have a negative impact.
All right, so let me ask you this. Let's first put on your high school coach's hat. If you're a high school coach, what are some things that you can be doing to help the player and their AAU coach get the most out of the AAU experience if you're the high school coach? What are you looking for from an AAU program? If I'm a high school coach and I want to send my player somewhere, what am I looking for?
Yeah, so I always advise parents to look for a couple things. One, you want to look for a program that's playing the right schedule. What I mean by that is, are they playing during NCAA live period, weekends? What tournaments are they playing in during those weekends as well? Does that coach have any sort of relationship with college coaches? Is there going to be any significant skill development going on with the program? If I send my kid to a program, I want him to come back as a better player than he was when I sent him to you. Those are kind of the big things that I would say coaches should look at. The way the NCAA is done now, when they added that June evaluation period, there's more opportunities now for high school coaches to kind of get more involved in the recruiting process during the summer. So that makes it even more important that the two be working together, because the players are going to be with their AAU coach in March and April, and sometimes May as well. And then they go to their high school coach for June, but then they're going back to their AAU coach in July. So if those two guys aren't on the same page, then, like I said, it's going to have a negative impact on the kid, 100%.
Absolutely. So then conversely, if I'm an AAU program, what am I hoping, what am I wishing for that high school coach to provide to me in terms of the relationship, in terms of what I'm looking for going the other direction, an AAU program that has strong ties with a high school coach? How does that relationship work if it's working out for the benefit of the kid from the AAU program's perspective?
Yeah, so I think one really important thing is for kids to have film. Like, I talk to so many kids who they don't have access to like high school film. So it's going to be really difficult for me to market you to a coach if I don't have any film to show him. In fact, it's probably impossible to do so. So in a perfect world, high school coaches would be filming their games and making that film readily available to their players. Also having, their GPA, access to their transcripts, having all that stuff readily available so that if a coach does reach out and ask for those things, that I can get them. Again, I talk to a lot of kids. You ask a kid what his GPA is, and, he looks at you like he has no idea what you're talking about. Or, have you signed up to take the SAT, ACT, and they don't know what either of those two things are? That's a problem. As a high school coach, I would hope that that's something that they're pushing, making sure their student athletes are taking the tests that they need to take if they want to play in college. A lot of schools are going test optional, but, they need to take the ACT or the SAT, and they need to do it before their senior year. They definitely need to do it before the spring of their senior year. Another thing is FAFSA. I talk to even more kids who don't know what FAFSA is. If I'm a high school coach, I'm going to be emphasizing that all my players complete their FAFSA. It becomes available October 1st. It should be done, no later than Christmas. Again, I talk to students in April and May, and they haven't done their FAFSA, but they're saying they want to play in college. Well, that's great, but that school's not going to be able to give you a financial aid package until you do your FAFSA. And it's not just about basketball related. This is just in general. Even if you don't play basketball and you just want to go to college, you need to complete that. And, if you don't, it's gonna have a huge impact on how much it costs for you to attend.
Absolutely. So clearly, and I don't think this is a surprise to anybody who's out there, or maybe it is, but there's clearly a gap in the knowledge that kids and some coaches have. Coaches, we've teamed up with Coach Tyler Whitcomb so you can now purchase his exclusive new playbooks right from the Hoopheads Pod website. If you're looking for ways to improve your team next season, these playbooks blend affordability with the quality content that serious coaches are looking for. Just visit hoopheadspod.com/store and you'll find playbooks from John Calipari of Kentucky, Leonard Hamilton from Florida State, and Mike Young of Virginia Tech. Check out these great resources at hoopheadspod.com/store. Can you talk a little bit about what you personally are doing through your AAU program, through what you do on a daily basis, whether it's through social media, through your contact with kids. Just talk a little bit about what you're doing to try to bridge that gap. You've talked about how education and basketball, the crossroads of those two is where your passion lies. So talk a little bit about what you're trying to do just on a personal level to try to improve that situation so that less kids miss out on opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. The biggest thing I see is there's a lack of honest evaluation. So a lot of kids are being told that that they're at a certain level that they're not, and that ultimately negatively impacts their recruitment. Similar to what I was talking about, myself when I was coming out of high school. I mean, like most kids nowadays, I thought I was Division I. I wasn't, clearly. So when a non-division school approaches me, I'm not gonna take it seriously because I've been told, or in my head, I believe that's beneath me. So what my goal is to educate young men and women to focus on finding the best fit from an academic, athletic, financial, and a social standpoint, and to not focus on the level of the school. If you're a Division I player, then you're going to have Division I schools recruiting you and offering you scholarships. If it's May of your senior year and you've never spoken to a Division I coach, it's unlikely that you're going to be offered a Division I scholarship. And just, people are afraid to have those uncomfortable conversations for whatever reason. I'm not. I'm perfectly comfortable doing so because it's coming from a good place. I'm just trying to help kids. My real passion is helping kids that are low income, so Pell eligible kids, working with them to help them find affordable college options. If they're going to play basketball, great. If not, that's great as well. The main thing is we want them to be in school because we know, if you look at any of the data, your lifetime earnings are significantly higher if you have a college degree versus just having a high school diploma. So as many kids as we can get into school as possible, that's ultimately our goal. Not only get to school, but ultimately graduate and then move on to gainful employment.
So what platforms are you, just share how are you reaching kids through the AAU program, through your social media, through conversations with parents? What's your methodology for getting that information out to players? Are you meeting with high school coaches and having that conversation with them? Just talk about the process of how you're sharing the things that you just shared with us. How are you getting that into the hands of the players and parents that need that information to be able to make these decisions to have an impact on their life?
So right now, I do it through my AAU program, but I mean, that's obviously limited because we typically have, no more than 10 to 12 players on the team. So I'm in constant contact with those guys. They're probably tired of me texting them all the time. Like, hey, you got your transcript? I'll send them a school. Hey, look up this school, research it. Okay, it's good. Do the questionnaire. Let's work on getting an email to send to the coach. All those kind of things. So that's. I mean, I do that all day while I'm at work. I should probably be doing more work, but that's okay.
We won't share.
But probably the biggest way I get information out is via Twitter. I was late into the game getting on Twitter. I got on Twitter, I think in like October 2016. I had just avoided doing it for so long. I don't know why. I love Twitter now. I'm probably on it way too much. But I some people probably say I rant, but I whatever comes to my head or is on my heart and I feel like sharing, I put it out. I do on occasion just reach out directly to kids to see what kind of assistance I can offer. Just my focus is on helping kids. I think I've been fairly successful in that. I could probably do more. I'm working to do more. That's the ultimate goal. But I'm pretty happy with what I've been able to do thus far. I'm hoping to keep doing it and take it to another level.
Yeah, I think that the big message that I see that you're always putting out there is just the idea that the level of basketball, and as you said a minute ago, the level of basketball ultimately isn't what's most important. It's that you find the correct fit. And too often, I think we see kids who they get this one-track mind. They only want to play Division I basketball. In many cases, they're not Division I basketball players. And unfortunately, they haven't had people tell them the truth about what level they can play, because too often, as we know, whether it's a trainer or it's an AAU coach or whatever, those people are incentivized to tell the parents and the player what they want to hear so that they keep coming back and keep paying the trainer or the AAU program. And that's a situation that is difficult. It's a difficult one to overcome, but we do see that. And I think you do a great job of being able to send out the message that, hey, there's more than just Division I basketball out there. And we've had a bunch of Division III coaches on here, and I'm amazed by the number of guys that we started out, they kind of shared this just without prompting. And then now I typically try to ask the question to any Division III coach or coach that's not a Division I coach that we've had on is, when they're recruiting players and they ask, hey, have you ever gone and watched a Division III basketball game to see how good the players are? And almost 80% of the time or so, the coaches say, yeah, the players and their parents say, no, we've never even been to a Division III game. And to me, that's kind of amazing that if you're being recruited at that level, and as you said, if you think you're a Division I player and you haven't heard from any Division I coaches, you probably want to reset your sights on something that makes a little bit more sense. But the fact that you're being recruited by a level of program that you've never even gone and watched a game at that level is kind of amazing to me.
Yeah, you really touched on something that is a really good point. And I've said this to some people before. Telling the truth is not a very profitable business in youth athletics.
Absolutely.
You get labeled a hater or, dream killer, all that kind of stuff. But if selling dreams is very profitable. And a lot of people make a significant amount of money doing so. That's just never been what I believe in or my style. In Atlanta, Georgia, there's literally every level of college basketball within driving distance. We got high major Division I, mid major Division I, low major Division I. We got Division II. We have HBCU Division IIs. There's NAIA. There's JUCO. There's Division III. There's NCCAA programs, all within driving distance. So there's no reason that a kid in the Metro Atlanta area shouldn't be exposed to all those levels. Now, are they gonna take the initiative to do that? I don't know. But I don't necessarily put that on the kids. That's more so on us as adults, because they model the behavior and the things that we emphasize. So if we as a basketball community society is D1, then of course that's what they're gonna focus on, and they're gonna look down on other levels. So I don't blame kids for it. I think adults are the problem. And again, I'm just speaking from my own personal experience, because I was the same way when I was in high school. I just didn't know any better. And I didn't really know any better until I actually went and visited a Division III school and could barely keep up with those guys. And that was kind of life change for me as well. It kind of opened my eyes. A lot of kids don't get that opportunity. And some kids live in areas where there are no Division III programs, so they don't have any exposure to it. So I can't blame them for not knowing anything about it, just they haven't been exposed to it. So as adults, again, it's on us to share as much information, share as much accurate and correct information with them so they can make informed decisions.
Yeah, I think the truth telling and putting the onus on the adult, whether that's, again, it could be a parent, could be an AAU coach, could be a high school coach, but you have to be able to have those difficult conversations with kids and families about where your level is. And I think that you've said it a couple times, and I think it's a great point that the schools that are recruiting you, whatever level they are, that's a pretty good indication of where coaches think your talent is. Now, that's not to say that a Division III coach doesn't occasionally recruit a player who may be a borderline player at a Division II or even a Division I player. But more often than not, if you're being recruited by 25 Division IIIs and you have one Division II, chances are your best chance for a successful career is probably going to be at the Division III level. Not to say that you couldn't take a chance and try it out at that Division II school, but more than likely where you're being recruited is probably where you belong. And then, as you said, you want to find the right fit. And the fit is more than just the fit on the basketball program, because ultimately you should be a student first, and your academics is going to carry you a lot further in your life. And then you also have the social piece of it as well, to make sure that you fit in on the campus and with, whatever major you're looking to have and all that kind of thing that fits into it. And so many times, and I think you've said it and I said it too, when you're 15, 16, 17 years old, you're not necessarily thinking about any of those things. You're thinking about strictly the basketball piece of it. And it's up to us as adults to be able to help educate kids and tell them the truth and help them find the right fit, so that ultimately they have a great 4-year career, both academically and athletically. And then they get done, they graduate. And even if you're a Division I player, your odds of playing your sport professionally are infinitesimal. And it's time then to get out into the real world and do something. And if you've been in the right place and you've taken care of your academics, you're going to be in a much stronger position when you graduate to be able to have a successful life, which is ultimately, for all of us who are in coaching, that's the ultimate measure of our success, is what our players end up doing after they leave us. And hopefully the impact that we've made on them makes a difference in their life in the long term. Being without basketball right now is tough for all of us. So we've partnered with Pro Skills Basketball to offer you a 50% discount on their ultimate shooting guide and video program that will put players on a guided path to becoming the best shooter they can be. With 1 year's worth of workouts that includes games, drills, and competitions, players will gain access to a blueprint showing them what it takes to become an elite level shooter. If you're looking to improve your shooting at home, this program can help. Visit hoopheadspod.com/store to check it out.
Kind of piggybacking off something you said, at the Division III level, all the elite high-level Division III programs are elite and good because they get scholarship-level players. So if you look at Division II, the programs that win at Division II levels because they get Division I players. So if I'm in a Division III, I'm going to recruit guys that I think are scholarship-level players. So players shouldn't take it as an insult if Emory's recruiting them. Like, you got to be really good to play at Emory. Much better than when I was there, because the players they have there now, I could not have played with these guys.
They're good.
They're on a different level.
I had an opportunity, as I told you, to go and watch them play Case when they came up to Cleveland this year, and it was an entertaining game. I don't think Coach Zimmerman thought it was their best game, clearly, as they lost that one. And,
right.
he was disappointed, but it doesn't take much to be able to watch a team and know that they're well coached and that they have talented players, and certainly that was the case with Emory this year for sure.
Yeah, and then they have, which you probably know, Matt Davitt. I mean, I think he was first team All-State in Ohio.
Absolutely.
His senior year, and he's playing at Emory. He doesn't even start, and he plays at Emory in Division III at the Division III level. And you got kids who, play JV, half their senior year who think that they're above Division III. So it's just, again, I don't put it on kids. As adults, we have to expose them to all the different opportunities available to them. And I say this all the time: you can have an amazing experience at the Division III level. I played at Emory. It was in the UAA. Our conference games are at NYU, Brandeis, which is in Boston, Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, Case Western in Cleveland, WashU in St. Louis, University of Chicago, and Rochester. We fly to all conference games. Like, you're not going to do that. You don't do that at a lot of Division I levels. Like,
trust me, I rode on a lot of buses, man.
You literally fly to your conference games. You fly into some of the biggest cities in the country. Granted, it's wintertime, so the weather's miserable, but you just can't beat that experience. Especially, like I said, for me, I had never been to any of those cities before. It was, it's great opportunities are available to you if you take care of business in the classroom, and as well as on the court as well. You can't beat it. It's good level basketball. If you want to play pro afterwards, you can do that as well. I played with and against multiple guys that went on to play professional basketball overseas who played Division III basketball. So it's just, to me, I'm a big D3 guy. I've probably been kind of labeled that. That's my little niche. But, I'm okay with that because I think it's not for everybody, but for the right person, right kid, it can be a great opportunity.
And I think to me, what it comes down to is if you find the right fit and you find the right basketball program, you find the right school, you find the right academics, you can have a great experience. And as you said, nowadays with the explosion of overseas basketball, if you're good enough, it's kind of like on the high school level. If you're good enough, people are eventually, I think, going to find you. And I think the pros is the same way. If you're good enough to be able to play pro basketball somewhere overseas, you're going to have an opportunity to do that because there's just a proliferation of opportunities to do it. You don't have to come out of a Division I program in order to be able to play professional basketball if that's something that you want to do. Those opportunities are going to be there. And if you've chosen correctly, you're going to end up with a great academic standing. You're going to end up with an opportunity to get out of school and get a great job and get your life and career started off the way that we all as coaches hope that kids get it started so that they can have a successful life. As I said, that somehow, somewhere along the way, there was an adult, whether it's a coach or a mentor or a parent, that shared with those kids and shared their life and tried to help them improve and get better. And ultimately, that's going to lead to success down the road for every kid. Chad, before we wrap up here, I want to give you a chance to share how people can reach out to you, how they can find out more about what you're doing. Obviously, share your Twitter because I know that's where you put out a lot of your content and information for kids. So please share that. And then if there's anything that we didn't touch on tonight, or if you just want to leave us with one final parting thought before we go, you can do that. And then I'll jump back in and wrap up the episode.
Sure. So my Twitter handle is Coach Hixon Dimes. That's CoachHixonDimes. So that's where I put out the majority of my content and information. Please follow. Again, I'm in it for the kids. I'm just trying to help as many kids as possible. I would just say for everyone going through that recruiting process, just keep an open mind. Be open to each and every opportunity that's presented to you. Don't get caught up on sticker prices. A lot of times I speak with students and their families, and they go on the website and see how much a school costs, and that scares them away. Go through the process, get your financial aid award letter, and then make your decision based off that. Just go through the process, and once you have all the information, then you can make an educated and informed decision, but don't do so beforehand.
Love it. That's great advice. A great one to end on. Chad, we can't thank you enough for spending an hour or so with us tonight. It's been a pleasure to walk through and hear your story, and then also just be able to talk to you about the impact that you're having on young people that you come in contact with through basketball and pushing education, which we clearly know is going to be the thing that's going to ultimately impact a kid's long-term success. So we appreciate you jumping on with us tonight, and to everyone out there, we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. Hey everyone, last year at the Junior NBA Summit, I came across an amazing company called iSport360 and its founder, Ian Goldberg. Their youth sports app gets coaches, players, and parents on the same page. Your team can set goals, share player feedback, training videos, sticker rewards, player evals, and practice assignments. All of this to foster a healthy team communication and culture. If your team or club struggles to keep open lines of communication, especially among teen parents, iSport360 can help. If you want to empower your athletes to have more success, more confidence, and more communication with their teammates, give iSport360 a try today. Shoot me an email, mike@hoopheadspod.com, or give me a call at 216-392-4059 to learn more. Registration is now open at headstartbasketball.com for this summer's Head Start basketball camps. We'll be hosting camps for boys and girls in grades 1 through 6 throughout the greater Cleveland area. Get registered today and make sure you hit the courts with us this summer.
Thanks for listening to the Hoopheads Podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.